Is it fitting and appropriate for a secular democracy where women have equal rights in every single respect with men to invite the Taliban Foreign Minister to visit India as an honored guest, given the way the Taliban treats Afghan women?
No, no, no. Unequivocally, no. It's a black and white question that deserves a black and white answer. There are no shades of grey anywhere in this answer, and there shouldn't be. Legitimizing the Taliban. It's not normalizing or accepting, it's legitimizing. This is government to government. This is government to government, don't forget. Mr. Prime Minister, we may disagree with your politics, but you are sitting in the Prime Minister's chair. And all of us, 50% of India, all the women of India, if you have 1.3 billion women, we also have 1.3 billion population, 700 million plus women look up to you as a Prime Minister. You've let them all down. This is not a chappan in chati. Where's the chappan in chati? You couldn't stand up. You couldn't tell the Taliban that, by the way, I can't invite you here till you change your policies. I'm sorry. We can meet you on third-person territory somewhere during a summit, but I cannot have a government welcome and government protocol and a state visit for you till all of these things are okay. I'm sorry, I can't do it.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. The Taliban government in Afghanistan is infamous for the stringent imposition of Islamic orthodoxy and in particular for its comprehensive denial of women's rights. Women are not allowed to study or work. They cannot visit parks or gymnasiums. They cannot even protest on the streets of Kabul. So is it fitting for a secular democracy where women have exactly the same rights as men in every single respect to invite the Taliban Foreign Minister as an honored guest for a 6-day visit? Does this create doubts about India's commitment, indeed the Prime Minister's commitment to Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao? That's the key issue I shall discuss today with the well-known and highly respected Trinamool Congress MP, Mahua Moitra. Mahua Moitra, let me start with a simple question. Is it fitting and appropriate for a secular democracy where women have equal rights in every single respect with men to invite the Taliban Foreign Minister to visit India as an honored guest, given the way the Taliban treats Afghan women?
No, no, no. Unequivocally, no. It's a black and white question that deserves a black and white answer. There are no shades of grey anywhere in this answer, and there shouldn't be.
In which case, let me give you, and more importantly, the audience, some details of the way the Taliban has treated women since it came to power in Afghanistan in 2021. Women are not allowed to study or work. They cannot visit parks and gymnasiums. They cannot protest on the streets of Kabul, and indeed adult women cannot be seen in public. They have to keep their faces covered at all times. Is that acceptable?
It's not acceptable at all. But you've got to see, I think what this entire unsavory episode has demonstrated is that how similar actually the RSS, which is the basic ideology behind the ruling dispensation in India currently, and the Taliban are. So if you remember when the Taliban, I'm amazed that the Taliban Foreign Minister was even invited. I'm amazed after being invited that he was given a red carpet welcome. I mean, I've seen there are welcomes and there are welcomes. There was nothing short of an absolute, they laid out everything for the man, everything. And what really was the first warning signal was the meeting in Hyderabad House. Now, that was not something that was done in the Afghanistan embassy. The meeting in Hyderabad House was done between the foreign minister, the acting foreign minister, and Dr. S. Jaishankar, who's India's foreign minister. In that meeting, there was not one woman official in the Indian delegation. You mean to tell me, Karan, that this was purely by accident and not by design? There was not a single woman in the room. This government, whenever any foreign dignitary is visiting, they love to invite the press. They love to sort of lay on their international credentials and their acceptability in the international world. They didn't even invite journalists. Only ANI and PTI were allowed in the room, and that too only male. Right? And then you went on to see that the foreign minister left the meeting in Hyderabad House and went on to the so-called Taliban Afghanistan embassy. By the way, the Afghanistan embassy still has the flag of the old republic in it. Yeah. And you have photos of the Bamia Buddhas at the back, which Mullah Omar, who was the head of the Taliban, had blown up. So did you see the irony in this? And then you had foreign ministers sit there and they had a room where there were no female journalists allowed. It is inconceivable, Karan. You know it, being a journalist in India and me being a member of the opposition, that the Indians would have not known about this, and B, not agreed to this. So to me, this is absolutely complicity.
Let's talk a little about that press conference that was held after, as you alleged, our foreign minister pandered to Afghan prejudices in Hyderabad House. That first press conference was held by the Afghan foreign minister for men only.
Correct.
Although later his colleagues claimed the exclusion of women was only a technical issue, the truth is not a single woman had been invited. Only men had been invited.
Sorry to interrupt. The only technicality, and you can quote me on this, was that you could not have had a pair of breasts to enter the room. That was the only technicality.
Should the Indian government have made its displeasure publicly known when this happened? After all, it happened on Indian soil. It is an affront to Indian women who were the ones who were kept out of that conference. Should the Indian government have made its displeasure known immediately?
Karan, you're talking as though the Indian government didn't know this was about to happen. The Indian government knew this was about to happen. They were complicit. And later, if you remember, when us and all of us were the members of the opposition, some female journalists and civil society kicked up a fuss, the Minister of External Affairs actually had the gall to put out a one-line presser which said we had nothing to do with this. You have invited at taxpayer money a member of the Taliban. Can we get this right? This is the Taliban. How are we normalizing this? This entire episode, what is so dangerous about this is that we are even discussing the exclusion of women. What we should be discussing is the mere invitation given to a brutal regime that actually criminalizes the female gender. You can't go to a park, you can't have a job, you can't go to school above the age of 13. If you're a woman, you can't go to a doctor unaccompanied. When women died in the earthquake in Afghanistan, they were left to die in the rubble because male disaster relief workers would not touch them to pull them out of the rubble. These are mass murderers. How are we even normalizing this? I mean, excluding women from a room, as terrible as it might be, is only much further down the line, Karan.
Absolutely. I take your point. You're saying fundamentally, the very concept of inviting the foreign minister of a regime run by the Taliban is unacceptable to a democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've come into power in 2021. They have implemented the Sharia rule in the strictest possible way possible. They've got a propagation of virtue and prevention of vice law, by the way. What does that remind you of? Doesn't that remind you of these love jihad and the UP law that prohibits interfaith marriage? Think about it. If you think about, I was reading Brinda Gopinath today in The Wire, and she actually pointed out 5 factors where if you analyze the RSS and the Taliban are 2 sides of the same coin. If you look at the constitution, the Taliban did away with the constitution in Afghanistan, and they've said only the Quran and the Sharia matters. In India, the RSS believes that the Indian constitution is borrowed from the British and Western countries and should be done away with. You had the secretary of the RSS, I think in June, come and say that the word secular and the word socialist should be removed from the Indian constitution. They believe very largely that we should be living according to the tenets of the Manusmriti. Then when you think about it, you think about, first is the constitutional one. You think about women and the way they treat women. In the Taliban ranks, there are no women. They treat like women don't exist. If you look at the RSS ideology, within the RSS, where are the women? The third thing that you can look at is when you think of procreation. The Taliban doesn't believe in any form of birth control or they said people should have as many children. If you look at the RSS are always telling Hindus you should go ahead and have more children. This is the way to put forward more warriors of the Hindu race. So there are very many similarities between the Taliban and between the RSS. If you look at the RSS volunteers who are always going, and if you look at couples in parks, if you look at Valentine's Day, if you look at eating or drinking or socializing or any kind of merrymaking, they look down on it. If you look at the Taliban, it's the same thing. It's anti-music, it's anti-society, it's anti-culture. So the similarities between the RSS and the Taliban are so many that it is natural that the RSS would love the Taliban to come here and basically also to tell Indian Muslims that look how well you're living. It's two things. One is to tell Indian Muslims, look how many freedoms we allow you, and the second is also to sort of say that nobody's untouchable for us. Look, we are inviting these great Islamists to come to India as well. The fact that Yogi Adityanath is accompanying welcoming the foreign minister and he's going to Deoband with that kind of a welcome is mind-boggling.
Let me ask you a specific question about women journalists in Afghanistan.
Correct.
According to the 2025 report by the Afghanistan Media Support Organization, only 7% of women journalists can work openly. 33% work in secret, 42%, that's almost half, have left journalism altogether.
Right.
Mr. Modi, as you know, calls India the mother of democracy and a Vishwa Guru. We claim we set the precedent for the rest of the world to follow. In which case, how should his government respond to these facts?
Well, Mr. Modi it is what is completely farcical is that the Afghan foreign minister has held more press conferences on Indian soil on a 3-day visit than the Indian Prime Minister has in over 10 years of sitting in his chair. Has that struck you? The foreign minister does 2 press conferences, one with women in the room, one without women in the room. Mr. Modi till date has not done 1 press conference. So I think the Taliban actually has one up on us even there. And if you think about the timing of it, between the 8th and the 10th of October, the People's Tribunal for the Women of Afghanistan convened in Madrid, in Spain, and 24 Afghan women testified. The preliminary findings were from this international panel that the Taliban's treatment of women amounts to gender persecution. Now, gender persecution, as you know, is a crime against humanity. You're basically inviting war criminals. If it's a crime against humanity, it's a war criminal.
Let me quote from that same tribunal that you mentioned a moment ago. It's the People's Tribunal for Women of Afghanistan. It met in Madrid and it almost coincided with the meeting of the Afghan foreign minister with the Indian foreign minister in Delhi.
Correct.
One of the tribunal's central demands was do not recognize and equally importantly, do not normalize the Taliban. But when the Indian government receives the Taliban without publicly challenging their abysmal record on women's rights, it's not just normalizing the Taliban, it seems to be accepting what the Taliban does. Do you agree with that?
It's legitimizing the Taliban. It's not normalizing or accepting, it's legitimizing. This is government to government. This is government to government, don't forget. This is using official taxpayer money, using Delhi police to escort them all through the streets of the national capital. This is letting them go. This is legitimizing. It is not only normalizing; it's legitimizing it.
So
it's telling you that
message...
either we turn a blind eye to what you do, or actually saying, you know what, we don't have a problem with it. It's telling Indian women, if you have a rapist or a murderer, why does society lock up rapists or murderers? Why do we have jail term or life term for them? Because we don't think that these people are worthy of mixing with other people in society, right? So when you look at a terrible element like the Taliban, which is responsible for war crimes against women, which is responsible for dehumanizing the women of Afghanistan and actually women all over, when you're calling them in and you're letting them sort of operate in a normal, legitimate surrounding, what are you doing? You are telling everybody else that this is okay. I see some people putting up photos of the Afghan foreign minister sitting on the floor eating and saying, "Oh, look how fabulous he is. He can sit on the floor and eat." Yes, it's so fabulous. He can sit on the floor and eat, but the women who cook the food, or maybe women haven't even been allowed to cook the food. There's a photo of him being given a rose by somebody when he can't put his face up, and someone saying, "Oh, this is tehzeeb." This is not tehzeeb. This is some kind of a nonsense where he believes that if he meets the gaze of a woman, he's going to vaporize into ash. Let's just call it out. Why are we scared of calling it out?
Let me at this point, Mahua Moitra, put the opposite to you. Afghanistan, as you know perhaps better than me, is a strategically very important country for India, with whom we have had close relationships, not just for decades, but centuries. How then do you respond to the argument that political concerns must take precedence over moral and ethical principles, that the country's interests come first, our personal feelings come second?
There's a very, very strong line here. It's not a fine line, it's a strong line, and it's a line that all of us, including you, Karan, must make very clear to viewers. When we say that feelings that delegitimizing and dehumanizing the female gender in Afghanistan is a matter of only morals and a matter of only personal emotions, that's the problem. It is not. There is no polity, there is no politics, and there is certainly no geopolitics that India can be a part of which excludes the female race. There is no geopolitics that can happen in South Asia, in countries, in Nepal, where you've had a female, in Bangladesh, where you've had a woman prime minister, in India, where you've had a woman prime minister, in Sri Lanka, where you've had a woman prime minister, where you've Mrs. Gandhi, where you have Sirimavu Bandaranaike. When you come from South Asia, where you have Benazir Bhutto, we can agree or not agree. We may not like them as individuals, but the fact is that they were allowed to compete in this polity as equals. Now you are now dealing with, this is bad politics. This isn't bad personal emotions or bad morals. It's just bad politics.
I hear what you're saying, but let me put this to you. Until Crown Prince Salman began liberalizing Saudi Arabia, that country's treatment of women was very similar to the way Taliban treats women in Afghanistan. Yet that never stopped Indian governments inviting the Saudi king to Delhi or visiting Riyadh themselves. Mrs. Gandhi went to Riyadh, Dr. Manmohan Singh went to Riyadh, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has been to Riyadh. Shouldn't the same logic apply to Taliban Afghanistan?
Not quite. The Saudis, while they've now opened up under the new regime where women can drive and lead completely normal lives, the Saudis never took it to what the Taliban. The Saudis, you have to understand, is a monarchy where power has been handed down from generation to generation. Unlike the Taliban, who came on the back of a very brutal civil war, the Saudis didn't attain power like that. A. B. The Taliban's interpretation of Sharia law is far, far, far more, I would say, more stringent than anything the Saudis, aggressive and stringent that the Saudis ever did. I mean, catch the Saudis ever, if there was, God forbid, an earthquake in Saudi Arabia, that women were not being pulled out of trouble. I mean, that's the standard. That's the standard. Yes, and also the Saudis over time changed. They changed. When people met them and spoke to them, the younger generation came out and changed. They put pressure on the senior monarchs and said, look, this is not the way to go forward, let's change. If you've seen the Taliban 2.0 is probably worse than Taliban 1.0.
Okay, let me, at the end, quote from Zahra Nader, the editor-in-chief of Zan Times, which covers human rights in Afghanistan, and she is herself an Afghan journalist. She says, and I'm quoting her, "The world cannot claim to stand for women's rights whilst shaking hands with those who silence them. The first step towards justice for Afghan women is refusing to make their oppressors respectable or their erasure normal." Do you agree with her? Or do you believe that India's fundamental strategic political interests take precedence?
We're looking at people who shot schoolgirls in their heads. We're looking at people who bombed girls' schools. We're looking at people who let women die in earthquakes simply because they're women. They were looking at people who don't want half of society educated beyond the age of 13. Are you trying to tell me that these people in any way will have anything to offer the people of India or the government of India on any kind of spectrum, be it political, moral, or social? That's the question we need to ask. I think the answer is an unequivocal no.
My
And if the
last
Indians think they're engaging in diplomacy, they're not. This is complicity in war crimes. It's not diplomacy.
My
It's
last
not.
question. The Prime Minister trades on the slogan Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Where does Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao stand today as a result of this visit and the symbolism of this visit?
This is a question which I wish in another world we could have asked the Prime Minister and he would have answered it. But the problem is, this is a question that's going to be bandied by Karan Thapar and answered by Mahua Moitra, and nobody is ever going to be able to pose it to the Prime Minister, and he's never going to be able to be accountable enough to answer it. That's the sad part of it. So that's where you know where exactly Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and all of that stands. But I think what this has made the Prime Minister is, you know what, Mr. Prime Minister, we may disagree with your politics, but you are sitting in the Prime Minister's chair. And all of us, 50% of India, all the women of India, if you have 1.3 billion women, we also have 1.3 billion population, 700 million plus women look up to you as a Prime Minister. You've let them all down. This is not a chappan in chati. Where's the chappan in chati? You couldn't stand up. You couldn't tell the Taliban that, by the way, I can't invite you here till you change your policies. I'm sorry. We can meet you on third-person territory somewhere during a summit, but I cannot have a government welcome and government protocol and a state visit for you till all of these things are okay. I'm sorry, I can't do it. The US did it to Narendra Modi after Godra. They didn't give him a visa because they said, we can't invite you, Narendra Modi, even though you are Chief Minister of Gujarat and have been given legitimacy by the people of Gujarat. Our politics in the United States does not allow us to host you as a visiting head of state. It wasn't till 10 years after Godra or more that Prime Minister got a visa to visit the United States. So it's not the same thing. It's not the Prime Minister himself has been subject to this. So there was very little that was stopping him from telling the Taliban, you know what, your politics and your policies do not sit well with the democratic, the constitutional, secular, socialist, women-empowered fabric of India. I cannot invite you to our soil. That's all it would have taken, Karan. Surely you agree with me.